The sun rose over an empty clearing where 19 tents had stood the night before, and Karga opened her eyes to find nothing but trampled earth and the fading scent of cook fires where her tribe should have been. She lay there for several heartbeats, her mind struggling to comprehend the abandonment before the crushing weight of understanding settled into her chest like a stone. They had left her. Her own people, the clan she had hunted for and bled beside, had packed their belongings in silence and moved on without so much as a farewell. She sat up slowly, her blanket falling away from her broad shoulders, and stared at the wagon ruts that led west toward the mountains. The morning air carried no voices, no laughter of children, no sounds of the tribe that had been her entire world. Karga stood on legs that felt unsteady, her green hands trembling as she rolled her blanket and gathered the few possessions they had left behind. A water skin with a hole in it, a cooking pot with a cracked bottom, a hunting knife too dull to be worth carrying. These were the only things her clan thought she deserved after 23 years of loyalty. She knew why they had abandoned her. 3 weeks ago, she had spoken against the war chief's plan to raid a human settlement. She had argued that the humans in this region had done nothing to provoke them, that attacking innocent people would only bring soldiers down upon their heads. The war chief had called her weak, contaminated by human sympathies, unfit to be called orc. But she had never imagined they would leave her like this, alone in territory she barely knew, with winter approaching and no tribe to shelter with. She looked down at herself, at the green skin that marked her as other, at the small tusks that protruded from her lower jaw, at the pointed ears that could hear the smallest sounds of the forest. She was strong, stronger than most human men, with muscles earned from years of hunting and traveling. Her black hair hung in a thick braid down her back, and her yellow eyes could track prey for miles. But strength and skill meant nothing without a tribe. Orcs were not meant to be alone. The isolation pressed against her like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. Karga forced herself to think practically. She had perhaps 2 weeks of travel before the first snows came. She could head west and try to catch up with her tribe, but they had made their choice clear. They did not want her. She could head north toward the disputed territories, where orc clans still fought against human expansion, but she had no taste for war against people who had never wronged her. East lay the great human cities, where an orc woman would be killed on sight or captured for sport. That left south, toward the frontier farmlands where humans had begun to settle in the last decade. It was a desperate choice, but Karga had heard stories of the frontier. Some said the humans there were different, less concerned with old hatreds, more focused on survival and building something new. She had no illusions about being welcomed, but perhaps she could find work, or at least trade her hunting skills for supplies to see her through the winter. She shouldered her meager pack and began walking south, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. The first 2 days of walking were torment. Karga moved through dense forest where autumn had already begun painting the leaves gold and crimson. She found water easily enough and caught a rabbit on the second evening, but the silence ate at her. No one called her name. No one asked how far until the next camp. No one sang the traveling songs or told stories around the fire. She sat alone each night, staring at flames that seemed too small and too quiet, and wondered if this was how she would die, slowly going mad from loneliness, until she made some foolish mistake that got her killed. On the 3rd day, she began to smell smoke, not the clean smoke of a campfire but the constant smoke of human habitation. She moved more cautiously, staying in the tree line until she crested a hill and saw the patchwork of farms spread out below. Fields of harvested grain lay golden in the afternoon sun. Dirt roads connected scattered homesteads. Cattle grazed in pastures, and she could see tiny figures of humans moving about their work. Her stomach clenched with fear. This was enemy territory by all the teachings of her childhood. Humans killed orcs. Humans feared and hated her kind. But what choice did she have? Karga watched until the sun began to set, trying to decide which farm to approach. Most were clustered together, close enough that a shout would bring neighbors running. But at the far eastern edge of the settlement, she spotted a smaller farmstead that sat somewhat isolated. A single house, a barn, fields that looked well tended but not large. No other homes within easy running distance. It was as safe an option as she was likely to find. She waited until full dark before moving, her orc eyes seeing easily in the moonlight. She approached from the fields, moving between rows of harvested corn, until she stood at the edge of the farmyard. The house was small but sturdy, with smoke rising from the chimney. Warm light glowed from the windows. The barn was quiet, probably housing animals already settled for the night. She could smell bread baking, and the scent made her mouth water. How long since she had eaten bread? Karga stood there for a long time, her courage failing her repeatedly. What was she doing? She should go back to the forest, live as a solitary hunter, take her chances alone. But the image of the long winter ahead, of the endless silence, of slowly starving because one hunter could not bring down the large game needed to survive the cold months, that image drove her forward. She walked across the yard, each step feeling like a betrayal of everything she had been taught, until she stood before the farmhouse door. She raised her green fist and knocked, 3 solid strikes against the wood. Then she stepped back, making herself as small and unthreatening as a 6-foot orc woman could manage, and waited. The sounds inside stopped. She heard footsteps, cautious and slow. Then the door opened a crack, and a man's face appeared in the gap, illuminated by the lantern he held. He looked to be in his early 30s, with brown hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water. He stared at her for a long moment, his face going pale, but he did not slam the door or shout for help. "Please," Karga said, the human language feeling strange in her mouth. She had learned it years ago from a captured merchant her tribe had traded with, but she rarely spoke it. "I mean no harm. I am alone. My tribe left me. I need work or food or just to rest in your barn for the night. I will not steal. I will not hurt anyone. Please." The man, whose name she did not know, continued to stare at her. His hand on the door was shaking, she noticed, but his eyes were not filled with the wild hatred she had expected. Instead, he looked confused, frightened, but also curious. He looked past her, scanning the darkness of his farmyard as if expecting an ambush. "There is no one else," Karga said quietly. "I am alone, truly alone." "Orcs don't travel alone," the man said, his voice rough with uncertainty. "Everyone knows that. They do not," Karga agreed. "Except when their tribe abandons them in the night for speaking against needless violence." Something in her voice must have convinced him, or perhaps it was the visible exhaustion in her posture, the way her shoulders sagged with defeat. He opened the door wider, though he did not step aside to let her in. "My name is Zane Stillwater," he said. "This is my farm, worked alone since my parents passed 2 years back. If you are lying to me, if this is some kind of trick, I have a loaded crossbow just inside this door, and I know how to use it." "No trick," Karga said. "My name is Karga. I have been walking for 3 days with almost no food. I am a good hunter, a good worker. I can earn any help you give me." Zane was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving over her, taking in her travel-stained clothes, her empty pack, the hunting knife at her belt that was clearly in poor condition. Then he stepped back and gestured toward his barn. "You can sleep in the barn tonight," he said. There is hay in the loft, and it is warm. In the morning, if you are still here and have not stolen anything or killed my animals, we can talk about work, but I make no promises." Relief flooded through Karga so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "Thank you. The barn is there," Zane said, pointing unnecessarily. "There is a well between here and there if you need water. Do not come to the house again tonight. In the morning, wait outside the barn. I will come to you when I am ready." "I understand," Karga said. She wanted to say more, to express the depth of her gratitude, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded and turned toward the barn. She heard the door close behind her as she walked across the farmyard. The well was exactly where he had indicated, and she drank deeply of the cold, clean water before continuing to the barn. The door was not locked, and inside she found a space that was indeed warm, filled with the comfortable sounds and smells of animals. A cow and a horse in stalls, some chickens roosting in the rafters, and a ladder leading up to a loft filled with hay. Karga climbed into the loft and burrowed into the hay, creating a nest that would keep her warm through the night. She lay there in the darkness, listening to the gentle breathing of the animals below, and felt the knot of tension in her chest loosen slightly. She was not safe, not really, and she had no idea what the morning would bring. But for the first time in 3 days, she was out of the wind, warm and on property where someone had chosen not to kill her on sight. It was more than she had dared to hope for. She fell asleep with tears on her face, mourning the tribe that had abandoned her and terrified of the uncertain future that lay ahead. Morning came with the sound of the barn door opening. Karga woke instantly, as all orcs did, going from sleep to alertness in a heartbeat. She climbed down from the loft to find Zane standing just inside the barn, a bucket in each hand. He had clearly come to tend to his animals and had expected her to be outside as he had instructed. They stared at each other in the dim light filtering through the barn's cracks. "I was about to come outside," Karga said. "I heard you and was climbing down." Zane nodded slowly, then moved to the stalls to feed and water his animals. Karga stood uncertainly, not sure if she should leave or wait. She watched him work, noting the efficient economy of his movements, the gentle way he spoke to his animals. He was not a large man by human standards, perhaps a few inches under 6 feet, but he moved with the confidence of someone who had done hard physical labor his entire life. "I did not expect you to still be here," Zane said without looking at her. "Thought you might steal some food and leave in the night." "I do not steal," Karga said, "and I had nowhere else to go." Zane finished with the animals and turned to face her, setting down his buckets. In the better light, Karga could see his face more clearly. He had a strong jaw, a straight nose, and eyes that looked tired as if he did not sleep well. There was an old scar on his left cheek, faded but still visible. "You said you can hunt," Zane said. "Yes, very well." "And you said you can work." "I am strong. I can do anything that needs doing on a farm. I have helped with planting and harvest in the past when my tribe stopped near human settlements." "Why would an orc tribe help humans with farming?" Zane asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "We did not help them," Karga corrected. "We had prisoners, people we had captured in raids. I watched them work, learned what they did. I do not agree with taking prisoners, but I could not stop it, so I learned from what I saw." Zane studied her for a long moment. "You speak the human language very well for an orc. I learned from a merchant my tribe captured. I was curious about your people, about how you think and speak. My curiosity was seen as suspicious by my clan, another mark against me." "You do not think much of your own people," Zane observed. "I think they are capable of great courage and great cruelty, same as humans," Karga said. I only wish they would choose the courage more often and the cruelty less. Zane picked up his buckets and walked toward the barn door, then paused and looked back at her. I need to think about this. You can stay in the barn today. I will bring you food at midday. Do not leave the barn or come to the house. If anyone sees you, there will be trouble for both of us. Do you understand? I understand. And Karga, Zane added, his voice hardening slightly. If you do anything to make me regret this kindness, I will not hesitate to defend myself and my property. I have killed orcs before, during the border wars. I can do it again if I must. The words hit Karga like a physical blow, but she forced herself to nod. I understand, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Zane left, closing the barn door behind him. Karga stood in the dim interior, her heart pounding. He had killed orcs before. He had fought in the wars, and yet he had given her shelter and promised her food. She did not know what to make of this human man, this Zane Stillwater who showed mercy to his former enemies, but kept a crossbow loaded by his door. The hours passed slowly. Karga busied herself by exploring the barn, taking inventory of what Zane had stored there. Bags of grain, tools that needed sharpening, a plow that needed repairs, coils of rope, barrels that smelled of apples. It was the barn of a man who worked hard but worked alone, someone who did not have enough hours in the day to keep everything in perfect order. True to his word, Zane appeared at midday with a plate of food. Bread, cheese, some cold meat, and an apple. It was simple fare, but it was more than Karga had eaten in days. She took the plate with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said. Zane nodded, then surprised her by sitting down on a barrel near the door. "Tell me about your tribe," he said. "Why did they really leave you?" Karga sat on the floor, the plate balanced on her lap, and began to eat as she spoke. 3 weeks ago, our war chief decided we should raid a human settlement about 10 days' travel from where we were camped. He said humans were expanding too far into traditional orc lands, that we needed to remind them to fear us. I said the humans in that area had done nothing to provoke us, that they were just farming families trying to survive like we were. I said if we attacked them, we would bring soldiers down on us, and people on both sides would die for no good reason. "What did the war chief say?" Zane asked. "He said I had been contaminated by human weakness, that I had lost the spirit of the warrior, that I was not fit to be orc. Others agreed with him. Some defended me, but not enough. The raid went forward without me. I was left in camp with the elderly and the young children. When the warriors returned, they had lost 3 people, and the war chief blamed me, said my words had poisoned their courage." "That makes no sense," Zane said. "I know, but grief and anger do not always make sense. The war chief decided we needed to move quickly before human soldiers came looking for revenge, and he decided I was a liability, someone who might betray the tribe to save human lives. So they left me. Just like that. No trial, no chance to defend yourself." "Orcs do not have trials," Karga said. "The war chief's word is law. If he says you are no longer part of the tribe, then you are not. I woke at dawn to find everyone gone." Zane was quiet for a while, his eyes distant. "During the border wars, I fought orcs who would have killed me without hesitation. I saw villages burned, families destroyed. I have no love for your kind, Karga, but I have also seen humans do terrible things in the name of revenge and fear. War makes monsters of everyone. You are a soldier." Karga asked. I served for 5 years, then came home when my parents got sick. They died before I could do much to help them. Now I work this farm alone and try to pretend the war never happened. Does it work? The pretending? No, Zane said simply, but I keep trying anyway. They sat in silence for a while, Karga finishing her meal while Zane seemed lost in his own thoughts. Finally, he stood and brushed off his pants. "I have decided to let you stay," he said. "You can sleep in the barn and work for room and board. If you hunt, we will share the meat. If you work the farm, I will feed you and keep you sheltered through the winter. But there are rules." "Of course," Karga said. "You do not go near the road or the neighboring farms. If anyone sees you, they will raise the alarm, and there will be a mob here within hours. You work only at dawn and dusk when it is too dark for people to see clearly. During the day, you stay in the barn. If I tell you to hide, you hide immediately, no questions. And if trouble comes because of you, you leave instantly and lead it away from my property." "Agreed." "Agreed," Karga said, feeling hope bloom in her chest. "I will follow your rules exactly. You will not regret this." "I already regret it," Zane said, but there was no heat in his words. "But something about you makes me think you are telling the truth, and I cannot in good conscience leave you to starve in the woods. Just do not make me regret it more than I already do." He left again, and Karga sat holding the empty plate, feeling the first real stirring of hope she had felt since waking alone in that abandoned camp. She had shelter, she had the promise of food, and she had work, which would give her days purpose and meaning. It was not a tribe, not a family, but it was something. It was a chance. The next morning, Karga woke before dawn and emerged from the barn to find Zane already up, standing in the farmyard with a bow and a quiver of arrows. He looked at her uncertainly, then held out the bow. "You said you can hunt," he said. "Prove it. I need meat for the winter, and I do not have time to hunt and run this farm both. If you can bring back a deer before noon, I will believe you are as good as you claim." Karga took the bow, testing its weight and pull. It was a good weapon, well maintained, with a draw strength that would serve for large game. "I will bring you a deer," she said with confidence she genuinely felt. Hunting was one thing she knew she could do well. She set off into the woods as the sky was just beginning to lighten, moving with the silent grace that all orc hunters possessed. The forest here was different from the northern territories where her tribe had roamed, but the signs of game were universal. She found deer tracks within half an hour, fresh prints in the soft earth near a stream. She followed them patiently, never rushing, reading the story the tracks told. 2 deer, possibly 3, moving slowly, stopping to browse. Not spooked, not running, which meant no other predator was nearby. She found them in a small clearing, grazing on the last of the autumn grass. A buck with a modest rack of antlers and 2 does. Karga positioned herself downwind, drew the bow, and took her time aiming. The bow felt good in her hands, solid and reliable. She let her breath out slowly and released the arrow. It flew true, taking the buck just behind the shoulder. The animal leaped and ran a few steps before collapsing. The does bounded away into the trees. Karga approached the fallen buck carefully, making sure it was dead before she began the work of field dressing it. It was a good-sized animal, perhaps 160 pounds, enough meat to make a real difference in winter stores. She cleaned it efficiently, then shouldered the carcass. It was heavy, but she was strong, and she made good time heading back to the farm. The sun was still climbing toward its peak when she emerged from the tree line and crossed the fields to Zane's farmyard. He was working near the barn and looked up in shock when he saw her carrying the deer. She lowered it to the ground at his feet, breathing hard but smiling. "1 deer, as promised," she said. "Before noon." Zane stared at the animal, then at her, then back at the animal. "You brought it back yourself. The whole animal." "I am strong," Karga said, as if this explained everything. "I can see that," Zane said, sounding somewhat dazed. "I expected you to dress it in the field and bring back meat in portions. I did not expect you to carry the whole thing." "This way nothing is wasted," Karga said. "The hide, the organs, the bones for broth, all useful." Zane nodded slowly, then seemed to shake himself out of his surprise. Right. Well, let us hang it in the barn and finish butchering it. I assume you know how to do that as well, of course. They worked together for the next few hours, and Karga found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of processing a kill. Zane proved to be competent with a knife, and they worked well together, falling into an easy pattern of shared labor. They spoke little, but it was a comfortable silence, the quiet of two people focused on their task. By late afternoon, they had cuts of venison hanging in the barn's cold room, the hide scraped and stretched for tanning, organs set aside for various uses, and bones cleaned for soup. Karga's arms ached pleasantly from the work, and she felt more like herself than she had since the morning she woke alone. "You are not lying about being a good hunter," Zane said as they cleaned their knives. "That was impressive work." "Thank you," Karga said, feeling a warm glow of pride at the praise. "Hunting is what I do best. Well, hunting and tracking. I can find anything if you give me time." "That may be useful," Zane said thoughtfully. "I lost one of my pigs 2 weeks ago. It got out of its pen and ran off into the woods. I have been meaning to track it down, but I have not had time. Think you could find it?" "Probably," Karga said. "I can look tomorrow morning if you like." "Do that," Zane said. "And Karga, you earned your keep today. You can stay as long as you follow the rules and keep working like this." That night, Karga lay in her hay nest in the loft, feeling something she had not felt in weeks. Contentment. She was useful. She was contributing. Someone needed her skills and valued her work. It was not the same as having a tribe, but it was something precious all the same. The days began to fall into a pattern. Karga rose before dawn and either hunted or did farm work that could be accomplished in dim light. She found Zane's missing pig, brought back 2 more deer, a wild turkey and a whole string of rabbits. She repaired fences, mucked out stalls, sharpened tools, and split enough wood to fill the woodshed twice over. Zane, for his part, kept his word about food and shelter, and slowly began to relax around her. They spoke more as the days passed, brief conversations during shared work that gradually grew longer and more personal. Karga learned that Zane had joined the army at 18, more out of necessity than patriotism. His family farm had been failing, and the army paid well. He had spent 5 years on the frontier, fighting orc clans, bandits, and once, a group of rogue mages who had tried to establish their own kingdom in the disputed territories. "Did you enjoy it?" Karga asked one evening as they sat in the barn, mending harnesses by lamplight. "The fighting?" "No," Zane said immediately. "I was good at it, but I hated it. Every battle, every death, even the victories felt hollow. I kept thinking about the families of the men I killed, orc and human both. I kept wondering if there was a better way." "Did you ever find one?" Karga asked. "No. Which is why I eventually came home. I figured if I could not stop the fighting, at least I could stop being part of it." "And now you have an orc living in your barn," Karga said with a trace of humor. "Fate has a sense of irony." Zane laughed, a sound Karga had not heard from him before. It was a good laugh, warm and genuine. "Fate is definitely mocking me," he agreed. "But honestly, Karga, having you here has made this farm run better than it has in 2 years. I forgot how much easier work is when there are 2 people sharing it." "You could hire human help," Karga pointed out. "I could, but then I would have to pay them and I would have to deal with their questions and their gossip. You work hard, ask for nothing but food and shelter, and you do not spread rumors in the village. It is a good arrangement." "As long as no one finds out I am here," Karga said. "Yes, there is that problem," Zane admitted. "But we have been careful. I think we can keep this going through the winter." Karga felt a small pang at his words. Through the winter. as if this was temporary, as if come spring she would move on. Where would she go? She had no tribe, no place in the world except this barn and this small farm. But she said nothing, just focused on the leather in her hands and tried not to think about the future. 2 weeks after Karga had arrived, the first real test of their arrangement came. Karga was in the barn in the middle of the day, organizing bags of grain, when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. She froze, every sense alert. Zane had told her to hide if anyone came, and there was a small storage room at the back of the barn that would conceal her. She moved quickly, slipping into the cramped space and pulling the door shut behind her just as she heard voices in the farmyard. Through a crack in the door, she could see and hear what happened next. Zane greeted two men, neighbors from what Karga could gather. They had come to invite him to a harvest celebration in the village and to ask if he needed any help preparing for winter. "I am managing well enough," Zane said, and Karga could hear the tension in his voice even if the visitors could not. "But thank you for the offer." "You have been working hard," one of the men said, looking around the farmyard. "Your wood is split, your fields are clear, and is that a new stack of hides I see in your barn? How are you getting so much done alone?" "I have been rising earlier and working later," Zane said smoothly. "Not much else to do on a farm alone but work." "Well, you should come to the celebration anyway," the other man said. "You spend too much time alone out here, Zane. It is not healthy. You need the company of others." "I will think about it," Zane said, clearly trying to end the conversation. The men eventually left, but not before spending another 10 minutes trying to convince Zane to be more social. When Karga finally emerged from the storage room, she found Zane leaning against the barn wall, his face pale. "That was too close," he said. "They noticed how much work has been done. They are starting to ask questions." "I am sorry," Karga said. "I did not think about how my help would look suspicious." "It is not your fault," Zane said. "I just need to be more careful, maybe make excuses about hiring temporary help that has already moved on. But this is going to get harder as winter approaches and people have more time to be nosy." "I could leave," Karga offered, though the thought made her chest ache. "If I am putting you in danger, no," Zane said firmly. "You are not leaving. We just need to be more careful. And maybe I need to actually go to that celebration. Keep up appearances. Remind everyone that I am a normal farmer and not someone hiding secrets." The harvest celebration was 3 days away, and Karga could see the worry eating at Zane as the date approached. He had never been good at socializing, he admitted, and after years of war and then years alone, he had lost what little skill he once possessed. But he would go, he said, because not going would raise more suspicion than his suddenly productive farm. The evening before the celebration, Zane sat in the barn with Karga, more anxious than she had ever seen him. They had developed a habit of spending an hour or two together in the evenings, talking or working on small projects, and Karga had come to treasure this time. She was surprised by how much she enjoyed Zane's company, how easy it was to talk to him, how safe she felt in his presence. "What if someone asks too many questions?" Zane said, pacing the barn floor. "What if they decide to come out here while I am gone and poke around?" "Then I will hide as I did before," Karga said calmly. "And if they find me, I will run into the woods and lead them away. You will say you had no idea I was here, that I must have been hiding in your barn without your knowledge. It will be fine, Zane." "How are you so calm about this?" Zane asked. "Because I have been living with danger my entire life," Karga said. "This is not so different. You just have to stay calm and act normal. People see what they expect to see. They expect you to be a lonely farmer working hard to survive the winter. So that is what you will show them." Zane stopped pacing and looked at her. "When did you become so wise?" "I am not wise," Karga said. I am just experienced in not belonging anywhere. You learn to be careful and invisible when you are always the outsider." Something in her voice must have conveyed the loneliness behind the words, because Zane's expression softened. He sat down on a bale of hay near where she was perched and looked at her carefully. "You are not an outsider here," he said quietly. "I know this is my farm and you are working for your keep, but you are not unwelcome, Karga. I want you to know that. I have been happier these past few weeks than I have been in years. This farm feels less empty with you here." Karga felt her breath catch. She had not expected such words from him, had not dared to hope that he valued her presence beyond the work she provided. "I have been happier too," she admitted. "Happier than I ever was with my tribe, if I am honest. They never really wanted me. They tolerated me at best. But here, with you, I feel like I matter." "You do matter," Zane said. "More than you know." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging in the air between them. Karga wanted to say more, to tell him that she thought about him constantly, that she had come to care for him in ways that both terrified and exhilarated her. But she was an orc, and he was a human, and even in the relative isolation of this frontier farm, some barriers seemed too great to cross. Zane left for the celebration the next afternoon, and Karga spent the time alone feeling restless and worried. She busied herself with tasks in the barn, but her mind kept drifting to the village, wondering if Zane was managing the social interaction, if anyone was asking dangerous questions. The hours dragged by with agonizing slowness. It was fully dark when Zane returned and Karga heard his horse before she saw him. She emerged from the barn to find him dismounting, looking tired but not distressed. Relief flooded through her. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than I expected," Zane said, leading his horse into the barn. "Everyone was too busy eating and drinking to ask many questions. I made up a story about hiring a traveling worker who helped me for a week before moving on. People seemed to accept it. And I managed to avoid committing to any winter visits, so we should have peace for a while." "That is good," Karga said, helping him unsaddle the horse. "There was one interesting thing," Zane said, his tone carefully casual. "I was talking to old Marcus, the village elder, and he mentioned that they have had no orc raids this season. No sightings, no attacks, nothing. He said it is the quietest the frontier has been in 5 years. And," Karga prompted. "And he said some people think the orcs might be moving away, giving up on the disputed territories. Others think they are planning something big. But a few people, Marcus included, think maybe some orcs are tired of fighting, same as some humans are." Karga absorbed this, not sure what to make of it. "Why are you telling me this?" Zane turned to face her in the dim lamplight of the barn. "Because I have been thinking. You are not the only one who spoke against unnecessary violence. You cannot be the only orc who is tired of the endless conflict. Maybe there are others out there like you, cast out or running away, trying to find a different path." "Maybe," Karga said. "But even if there are, what difference does it make? Orcs and humans still hate each other. One person or even a dozen people cannot change that." "No, but they can choose to live differently in their own lives," Zane said. "You chose to come here instead of joining another war band. I chose to leave the army and become a farmer. Those are choices that matter, even if they do not change the whole world." "I suppose," Karga said, though she was not entirely convinced. Zane stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the earnest expression on his face. "What I am trying to say, very badly, is that I am glad you made the choice you did. I am glad you came to my farm. And I want you to stay, not just through the winter, but for as long as you want to be here." Karga's heart began to pound. "Zane, I am an orc. You are human. Even if we both wanted this, and I do not even know what this is, how could it possibly work?" "I do not know," Zane admitted. But I think we should try to find out. Because when I was at that celebration tonight, surrounded by my own people, all I could think about was getting back here to you. That has to mean something. It means you are either very brave or very foolish, Karga said, but she could not keep the tremor out of her voice. Probably both, Zane said with a small smile. But I meant what I said earlier. I have been happier with you here, and I think maybe you feel the same way. I do, Karga whispered. But Zane, the risk. I know the risks, Zane interrupted gently. I know what would happen if people found out. I know what we would be choosing by pursuing this. But I also know that I have spent years being alone and afraid and trying to live a half-life. I do not want to do that anymore. Karga felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever wanted her like this, had ever chosen her despite the risks and complications. Her tribe had abandoned her for being too sympathetic to humans, and here was a human willing to face social exile for being too sympathetic to an orc. The symmetry was almost painful. I want to stay, she said. I want to try, whatever this is. But you have to promise me that if it becomes too dangerous, if people start to suspect, you will let me leave to protect you. Only if you promise the same, Zane countered. If staying puts you in danger, you have to promise you will save yourself, even if it means leaving me behind. That is not a promise I want to make, Karga said. Neither do I, but we have to be realistic, Zane said. We are not just risking social disapproval here. If people find out, there could be violence. I need to know you will run if things go bad. Karga nodded reluctantly. I promise. But I will not run unless I have no other choice. Fair enough, Zane said. Now come here. He opened his arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Karga stepped into his embrace. She had to bend slightly to do so, being several inches taller than him, and the position felt awkward at first. But then his arms closed around her, and she felt the warmth of his body against hers, and something inside her that had been tense and guarded for weeks finally relaxed. She wrapped her own arms around him, careful of her strength, and let herself just feel the simple comfort of being held. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, just holding each other in the lamplight of the barn. Finally, Zane pulled back slightly and looked up at her face. His hand came up to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle against her green skin. "You are beautiful," he said softly. Karga laughed, a shaky sound. "I am an orc. We are not beautiful." "You are beautiful to me," Zane insisted. "Everything about you. Your strength, your courage, your kindness, and yes, even your green skin and your tusks, all of it is beautiful." Karga did not know what to say to that. No one had ever called her beautiful before. Orcs valued strength and fierceness, not beauty. But the way Zane was looking at her, with such open admiration and affection, made her believe he truly meant it. "You are good," she finally said. "A good man, a good person." "I did not know humans could be like you." "Most humans are not like me," Zane said. "Just like most orcs are probably not like you, but we found each other anyway, which seems like something worth holding on to." "Yes," Karga agreed, "something worth holding on to." They kissed then, a tentative meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Karga had never kissed anyone before, had never been close enough to anyone to want to, but she found that it came naturally when it was with someone she cared for. Zane's hands tangled in her hair, and she pulled him closer, losing herself in the sensation of being wanted, being chosen, being loved. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Zane rested his forehead against her collarbone, since he could not quite reach her forehead, and laughed. "This is going to be complicated," he said. "Very complicated," Karga agreed, "but maybe worth it." "Definitely worth it," Zane said. The next few weeks were the happiest Karga had ever known. She and Zane fell into a routine that included both work and affection. learning to navigate this new relationship that neither of them had expected. They were careful, always careful, making sure no one saw them together in any way that would raise suspicion. To the outside world, Zane remained a solitary farmer, and Karga remained completely hidden. But in the privacy of the barn and the farmyard in the early mornings and late evenings, they built something real. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Karga told him stories of her tribe, of growing up always feeling different, always questioning the things other orcs accepted without thought. Zane told her about the war, about the things he had done and seen, about the guilt he still carried for lives he had taken. "I killed orcs who were probably just like you," he said one night as they sat together in the hayloft, sharing a simple dinner. "People who were following orders, who were just trying to survive and protect their families. I never thought about them as individuals before. I just thought of them as the enemy. And I never thought about humans as individuals either," Karga admitted. "I saw you all as invaders, people stealing land that belonged to orcs. I never considered that you were just families looking for a place to live, same as we were." "We are all just trying to survive," Zane said. "But somehow we keep finding reasons to kill each other instead of reasons to coexist." "Maybe that is changing," Karga said. "Maybe we are the start of something different." "Maybe," Zane said, though he sounded doubtful. "Or maybe we are just two people finding a moment of peace in the middle of endless war." As winter approached, they worked together to prepare the farm for the cold months ahead. Karga hunted constantly, bringing in so much meat that Zane had to smoke and preserve more than he ever had before. They harvested the last vegetables from the garden, stored apples and root vegetables in the cellar, and made sure the animals had enough fodder to last until spring. The work was hard but satisfying, made better by the fact that they did it together. Karga found herself laughing more than she ever had, finding joy in small moments like teaching Zane how to properly skin a rabbit or learning from him how to preserve different types of meat. These were skills she had known in theory but had never refined, and she appreciated his patient instruction. Winter came in earnest in late November, bringing snow and freezing temperatures. The farm became even more isolated, with roads between homesteads becoming difficult to travel. This suited Karga perfectly, as it meant even fewer chances of being discovered. She moved into the barn's tack room, which Zane had insulated and fitted with a small stove, making it warm enough for the coldest nights. They spent long winter evenings together, sometimes in the barn and sometimes, when they were sure no one could possibly be traveling in such weather, in Zane's farmhouse. Those evenings in the house felt precious and stolen, moments of domestic normalcy that both of them knew were fragile and temporary. They would sit by the fire, Karga working on tanning hides or mending clothes while Zane read aloud from the few books his parents had left him. It was during one of these evenings in late December that their peace was shattered. They were sitting together on Zane's small couch, Karga leaning against him while he read a collection of old adventure stories, when they heard the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast despite the snow, they both froze. Then Zane jumped up and blew out the lamps, plunging the house into darkness lit only by the dying fire. "Get to the barn," he hissed. "Hide in the storage room and do not come out no matter what you hear. Go now." Karga wanted to argue, wanted to stay and help if there was trouble, but she had promised to run if necessary. She slipped out the back door and ran through the snow to the barn, her heart pounding. She could hear voices now, men shouting and the sound of fists pounding on Zane's front door. She made it to the barn, climbed to the loft, and from there slipped into the small storage space that had a loose board leading to a hidden crawlspace beneath the barn. It was cramped and cold, but it was well concealed, and she had used it before when neighbors came calling unexpectedly. From her hiding place, she could hear muffled sounds from outside, men's voices angry and demanding, Zane's voice calmer but strained. She caught fragments of conversation, tracks in the snow. Too much smoke for one person. Hiding something. Her heart sank. Someone had seen signs of her presence. All their caution had not been enough. She huddled in the darkness, barely breathing, terrified not for herself, but for what would happen to Zane if they found her. The barn door opened, and she heard multiple sets of boots on the wooden floor. Lantern light flickered through the cracks in her hiding place. Men spread out, searching, poking into every corner. One of them climbed to the loft, and Karga held her breath as his boots stopped just inches from the board that concealed her entrance. "Nothing up here but hay," the man called down. "Check the tack room," another voice commanded. They searched the tack room, finding her few possessions. There was a long, ominous silence, and then one of the men said, "Whose things are these, Stillwater? You got someone living in your barn." Karga could hear Zane's voice, steady despite what must have been intense fear. "I had a hired hand for a few weeks. He moved on after the harvest, must have left some things behind. These belongings are well maintained," another man said suspiciously, "and this stove has been used recently. Someone has been living here and recently. I sometimes sleep out here when I am working late with the animals," Zane said. "It is warmer than walking back to the house in the middle of the night. You expect us to believe that?" The voice belonged to someone older, someone with authority. "Zane, we have known you since you were a boy. Do not lie to us. If you are harboring someone dangerous, tell us now before this gets worse." "There is no one dangerous here," Zane said firmly. "Just me and my animals. You are welcome to search the entire property if you do not believe me." They did search, for what felt like hours. Karga remained hidden, cramped and terrified, listening to them move through every building on the farm. But they did not find the hidden crawlspace, and eventually she heard them gathering in the farmyard again. "We found nothing," one man admitted. "But Zane, those tracks we saw coming from the forest to your farm, they were large. Larger than any human should make. If there is something you are not telling us, if you are in some kind of danger, we can help." "I appreciate your concern," Zane said, and Karga could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "But I am fine. Perhaps the tracks were from a bear or some other animal. You know how difficult it can be to judge such things in snow." There was more muttering, more suspicion, but eventually the men mounted their horses and left. Karga remained in her hiding place long after the sound of hooves had faded, too afraid to move in case someone had stayed behind to watch. It was not until she heard Zane's voice, very quiet, calling her name from the loft that she finally pushed aside the loose board and emerged. Zane pulled her out of the crawlspace and held her tightly, both of them shaking. "I am so sorry," he said. "I should have been more careful. I should have covered your tracks better." "It is not your fault," Karga said. "We both knew this was a risk. What do we do now?" Zane pulled back and looked at her, his face grave. "They will be watching. Not openly, but they will be paying attention to this farm now. Any strange signs, anything unusual, and they will come back. And next time they might bring soldiers or might not give me a chance to explain." "Then I have to leave," Karga said, her heart breaking even as she said the words. "Tonight before they come back. I can disappear into the forest, head north or west. You will be safe if I am gone." "No," Zane said fiercely. "I am not losing you. There has to be another way." "What other way?" Karga asked. "Zane, they are looking for me now. Even if they do not know what I am yet, they know someone is here. It is only a matter of time before they figure it out, and then we are both dead." Zane was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he thought. Then his expression cleared and he looked at her with determination. We leave together." "What?" Karga asked, not sure she had heard correctly. "We leave together," Zane repeated. "This farm, this village, all of it. We take the horse, whatever supplies we can carry, and we go. Head west toward the mountains, find some isolated valley where no one knows us and no one cares about old hatreds. Start fresh." "Zane, this is your home," Karga protested. "Your parents' farm, your land, you cannot just abandon it." "It is not a home anymore if you are not in it," Zane said simply. "I have been alone for years, Karga. I thought that was just how my life would be. But then you came, and for the first time I understood what I had been missing. I am not giving that up. I am not giving you up. Not for a piece of land, not for the approval of neighbors who were never really my friends anyway. We leave together, or we do not leave at all." Tears streamed down Karga's face, and she realized she was crying for the first time since her tribe had abandoned her. But these were not tears of grief or fear. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and love for this human man who was willing to give up everything for her. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we leave, we can never come back. You will be giving up your entire life." "I am sure," Zane said. "You are my life now. Everything else is just details." They spent the rest of the night preparing. Zane gathered money, his weapons, warm clothes, and as much preserved food as they could reasonably carry. Karga packed her few possessions and selected the best furs and hides to take for trading. They loaded everything onto the horse and into a small cart, working quietly and efficiently, knowing that every minute they delayed increased the risk of discovery. Just before dawn, they took one last look at the farm that had been both a refuge and a prison. Then Zane locked the door to his house, left the key under a stone, and climbed onto the horse behind Karga. They headed west, away from the village, toward the distant mountains that promised isolation and freedom. The journey was hard. Winter travel was always dangerous, and they had to move carefully to avoid being seen or followed. They stayed off main roads, traveled through forests and along frozen streams, and camped in sheltered spots where no one would think to look. Karga's hunting skills kept them fed, and Zane's knowledge of survival and navigation kept them moving in the right direction. They spoke little during those first days, both too exhausted and too focused on escape to manage much conversation. But at night, when they huddled together for warmth in their small tent, they found comfort in each other's presence. They were leaving behind everything familiar, but they were facing the unknown together, and that made all the difference. After a week of travel, they began to relax slightly. They had seen no signs of pursuit, and they were now far enough from Zane's farm that even if someone came looking, they would have no idea which direction to search. They started taking more time during the day to rest and talk, discussing their plans for the future. "We need to find a place far from any settlement," Karga said as they sat by their campfire one evening. "Somewhere we can build a small homestead and live without interference." "I was thinking the same thing," Zane said. "I remember from my army days that there are valleys in the western mountains that are almost impossible to reach. Too remote for most settlers, but with good water and hunting. If we can find one of those, we could build something sustainable." "What about supplies?" Karga asked. "We will need things we cannot make or hunt. Tools, metal, fabric. There are trading posts in the mountains," Zane said. "Places where trappers and prospectors go. We can trade furs and whatever else we have. We will need to be careful, but it is doable. And if people ask questions about an orc and a human traveling together, then we tell them we are partners in a trapping business," Zane said. "It is not common, but it is not unheard of. Out here on the frontier, people are more concerned with survival than with who you are keeping company with." It was not a perfect plan, but it was a plan, and it gave them hope. They continued west, climbing higher into the mountains as the days passed. The air grew thinner and colder, but the snow was lighter here, blocked by the peaks. They saw mountain goats, elk, and even a pair of eagles circling overhead. It was wild country, harsh and unforgiving, but also beautiful in its own way. They found the valley in early January. It was a small, sheltered bowl surrounded by steep peaks, with a stream running through it that would provide water year-round. There were trees for building and firewood, and signs of plentiful game. Most importantly, it was almost impossible to reach except through a narrow pass that could be easily defended if needed. "This is it," Zane said, looking around with satisfaction. "This is where we start over." They spent the rest of the winter building a small cabin. It was rough work in the cold, and there were days when they both wondered if they would survive. But they worked together, using Zane's building knowledge and Karga's strength, and slowly the cabin took shape. It was not large, just one room with a stone fireplace and a loft for sleeping, but it was sturdy and warm, and it was theirs. As they worked, they talked about everything. About their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. Karga told Zane about the orc traditions she missed, and the ones she was glad to leave behind. Zane told her about his parents, about the farm he had loved but also resented, about the weight of expectations he had carried all his life. "I always thought I would live and die in that house," Zane said one evening as they sat in their nearly finished cabin. "I thought my whole life was mapped out, just following the path my parents laid down. But now I am here, in a place I never imagined, with a person I never expected to meet, and I have never been happier." "I feel the same," Karga said. "My tribe taught me that orcs were superior, that humans were weak and corrupted. But you have shown me that strength comes in many forms and that kindness is not weakness. You have given me a home when my own people cast me out. I will never forget that." "You do not have to forget it," Zane said, reaching over to take her hand. "Just remember it every day, and I will remember what you have given me. We will build a life here based on that, on choosing each other every day." "I can do that," Karga said, squeezing his hand. By early spring, the cabin was finished and they had established a routine. Zane built furniture and tended a small garden he planned to plant as soon as the ground thawed. Karga hunted and trapped, bringing in meat and furs they could trade. They fell into the comfortable rhythm of two people who knew each other well and worked well together. In late March, they made their first trip to a trading post 2 days' travel from their valley. It was a rough place, a collection of buildings clustered around a central lodge where trappers and prospectors gathered. Karga wore a heavy cloak with the hood up, trying to be inconspicuous, but she knew her green skin and tusks were visible to anyone who looked closely. The trader who ran the post was a grizzled old man named Henry who looked them over with sharp eyes but asked no questions. They traded a stack of prime furs for tools, seeds, salt, and other necessities, and Henry treated them with the same brisk courtesy he showed all his customers. As they were leaving, Henry called after them. "You two planning to stay up in those mountains?" Zane tensed, but answered calmly. "Yes, we found a good spot for trapping." "Thought so," Henry said. "Word of advice. There are folks even out here who would cause you trouble if they knew what you are, but there are also folks who figure it is none of their business how others choose to live. I am one of the latter. You bring me good furs, treat me fair, and I will do the same, but watch your backs. Not everyone out here is as enlightened as me." "Thank you," Karga said, surprised by his frankness. Henry nodded. "You are welcome, and miss. That is some fine work on those furs. Best tanning I have seen in years. You come back in a few months, and I will have customers lined up for whatever you bring." They left the trading post feeling cautiously optimistic. If there were people out here who were willing to accept them, or at least willing to look the other way, then maybe they could make this work. Maybe they could build a life in this isolated valley and find some measure of peace. The spring and summer passed in a blur of work and simple contentment. They planted a garden that flourished in the mountain soil. Karga hunted and fished while Zane built additions to their cabin, including a covered porch and a proper storehouse. They made 2 more trips to the trading post, each time trading furs for supplies, and each time Henry greeted them without judgment or suspicion. On one of these trips, they met another couple, an older human man and a younger half-orc woman. The woman's mixed heritage was obvious in her greenish skin and slight tusks, and she wore it openly, without shame or fear. She and Karga locked eyes across the trading post, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were not alone. There were others out here, others who had crossed the boundaries their societies had drawn, others who were building lives in the spaces between. The woman approached them as they were packing their supplies. "I am Mara," she said. "This is my husband, Thomas. We have a homestead about 3 days north of here. It is good to see others like us." "I am Karga. This is Zane," Karga said, feeling a rush of relief at meeting someone who understood. "We have a valley to the east. We have been there since winter. If you ever need help or just want company, you are welcome to visit," Mara said. "It can be lonely out here, even with a partner. It helps to know there are friends nearby." They exchanged more information, promising to visit when travel was easier, and parted ways feeling less isolated than they had before. Knowing there were others, knowing they were not the only ones trying to bridge the gap between orc and human, gave them hope that what they were building could last. By the time autumn came around again, they had been in their valley for 9 months, and it truly felt like home. The cabin was comfortable, the storehouse was full of preserved food and furs, and they had even added a few chickens and a goat to their small homestead. They had everything they needed to survive the winter comfortably. One evening in late September, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Zane took Karga's hand and said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Karga asked, leaning against him. "We have built a life together, a good life. But it is still somewhat temporary, undefined. I want to make it official, permanent. I want to marry you, Karga, if you will have me." Karga felt her breath catch. Marriage was a human custom, not one observed by orcs, but she understood the weight of what he was offering. A public declaration, a commitment, a statement that they were bound together not just by circumstance but by choice. "Orcs do not marry," she said slowly, "but humans do, and I am living in a human's world now. Yes, Zane, I will marry you." They had no priest, no official to perform the ceremony, so they created their own. They stood together in the valley that had become their home, exchanged vows they had written themselves, and pledged their lives to each other under the open sky. Zane gave Karga a ring he had made from a piece of silver he had traded for, and Karga gave him a necklace made from a bear claw, symbolizing strength and protection. It was a simple ceremony, witnessed only by the mountains and the wind, but it was real and meaningful, and when they kissed to seal their vows, Karga felt a completeness she had never known before. She belonged somewhere. She belonged with someone. She was home. That winter was the happiest of Karga's life. She and Zane lived in their cabin, weathering storms together, working on projects, and simply enjoying each other's company. They visited Mara and Thomas twice, trading stories and supplies, and building a friendship that made the isolation less oppressive. They returned to Henry's trading post in the spring, and he congratulated them on their marriage with gruff approval, mentioning that he had performed informal weddings before if they wanted it more official. We are official enough for ourselves, Zane said. But thank you. Well, in that case, let me give you a wedding present, Henry said, and he pulled out a finely crafted hunting knife. For the lady. Saw her old one was looking rough. Consider it my contribution to your future. Karga accepted the knife with gratitude, touched by the unexpected kindness. It was moments like these that reminded her that while the world was full of hatred and prejudice, it was also full of good people who chose to see beyond the surface. The second year in their valley was even better than the first. They expanded their homestead, adding a small workshop for Zane and a smokehouse for Karga. They increased their flock of chickens and added 2 more goats. Their garden produced more than they could eat, and they traded the excess at the trading post. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, they were happy. In the late summer of their second year, Karga discovered she was pregnant. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. She had never imagined having children, had never thought she would find a partner or a stable home. And now here she was, carrying a child that was half orc and half human, a child that would embody the bridge they had built between their peoples. When she told Zane, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby. This is incredible, Karga. We are creating a family." "Are you not worried?" Karga asked. "This child will be different, neither fully orc nor fully human. It might face the same prejudice I have faced, or worse. Then we will teach it to be strong and kind, just like you," Zane said. "We will teach it that being different is not a weakness, and that true strength comes from choosing love over hate. Our child will be amazing, Karga. I know it." The pregnancy was not easy. Karga's body, unused to carrying a half-human child, struggled at times. But she was strong, and with Zane's constant support, she managed. They prepared for the birth, gathering supplies and seeking advice from Mara, who had given birth to 3 children in the wilderness. In the early spring, as snow still dusted the peaks around their valley, Karga went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when she feared neither she nor the baby would survive. But Zane stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to let her give up. And finally, after hours of struggle, their daughter was born. She was perfect. Slightly green-skinned but lighter than Karga, with tiny tusks that would grow larger as she aged, and her father's creek-water eyes. She was strong and healthy, with a loud cry that announced her arrival to the world. They named her Ember, for the small spark that had grown into the roaring fire of their love. Holding her daughter for the first time, Karga felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. This child represented everything they had fought for, everything they had risked. She was proof that love could cross any boundary, that 2 people from warring peoples could create something beautiful and new. She was the future, and Karga vowed to protect her and teach her to be strong and kind, just as Zane had said. The next few months were exhausting but wonderful. Karga and Zane adapted to life as parents, learning as they went, making mistakes but always supporting each other. Ember grew quickly, alert and curious, seeming to inherit the best traits of both her parents. She had Karga's strength and sharp senses, and Zane's gentle nature and quick mind. When Ember was 6 months old, they took her to visit Mara and Thomas, who welcomed them with open arms and celebrated the arrival of the newest member of their small frontier community. Mara's own children, all half-orcs in their teenage years, were fascinated by the baby and showered her with attention. "This is what the future could look like," Thomas said as they sat around the dinner table that evening. "Children who do not see the divisions we saw, who grow up knowing that love is more important than old hatreds. You too are building something important here. We are just living our lives," Zane said. "Trying to be happy and raise our daughter right." "That is exactly what makes it important," Mara said. "You are proving it can be done. Every day you stay together, every day you choose each other, you are making a statement that the old ways do not have to be the only ways." Karga looked around the table at this makeshift family they had found, at her husband and daughter, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Yes, they had lost much. She had lost her tribe and Zane had lost his farm and his old life, but they had gained something far more valuable. They had gained each other, and the freedom to build a life based on love rather than fear or tradition. As the years passed, their valley homestead continued to thrive. Ember grew into a bright, active child who loved exploring the mountains and learning everything her parents could teach her. They made regular trips to the trading post, where Henry and other traders came to know and respect them. They maintained their friendship with Mara and Thomas, and even met a few other mixed couples who had settled in the remote mountain regions. It was not a perfect life. There were still dangers, still moments when they encountered prejudice or had to defend their choices. Once, a group of human prospectors came through their valley and made threatening remarks about Karga and Ember. Zane made it clear, with a combination of words and a well-displayed crossbow, that they were not welcome, and the prospectors moved on. Another time, an orc war party passed near their valley, and Karga had to hide with Ember while Zane dealt with them, claiming to be a simple hermit. But these incidents were rare, and most of the time they lived in peaceful isolation, building their life one day at a time. They expanded their homestead further, adding a proper barn and more livestock. They taught Ember to read and write, to hunt and farm, to be strong but also compassionate. They told her stories of both human and orc cultures, teaching her to take pride in both halves of her heritage. When Ember was 5 years old, Karga became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their son was born without complication. They named him Ash, continuing their theme of names related to fire and warmth. He looked even more human than his sister, with only a slight greenish tint to his skin and very small tusks, but he had Karga's yellow eyes and her fierce determination. With 2 children, their small cabin was bursting at the seams, so Zane spent the next year building an addition, creating a larger home that could comfortably house their growing family. Karga helped when she could, but mostly she focused on caring for the children and keeping the homestead running while Zane built. The valley that had once seemed so remote and empty was now filled with life and laughter. Ember and Ash played in the stream, helped tend the animals, and learned the skills they would need to survive in this frontier world. They grew up knowing they were different, but also knowing they were loved and valued. They knew the story of how their parents met, how love had brought an abandoned orc woman to a lonely farmer's door, and how that love had created a family and a home against all odds. One evening, when Ember was 8 and Ash was 3, the family sat together on their porch watching the sunset. It had become a tradition, this quiet time together at the end of each day, a moment to reflect on what they had built and what they hoped for the future. "Tell us again about how you met," Ember said, as she often did. She never tired of hearing the story. Karga and Zane exchanged a glance, smiling at each other. Then Karga began. "I woke one morning to find my tribe had migrated without me in the night. I was alone and afraid, with nowhere to go. So I walked for 3 days until I came to a small farm where a kind man lived." "And you knocked on his door even though you were scared?" Ember prompted. "I knocked on his door even though I was terrified," Karga confirmed. "Because sometimes, when you have no other choice, you have to be brave and hope that the world has some kindness left in it." "And Father let you stay in the barn," Ash added, his young voice proud. I let her stay in the barn, Zane agreed, because she asked for help, and turning her away would have made me as cruel as the people who abandoned her. It was not a heroic choice. It was just the right thing to do. And then you fell in love, Ember said dreamily. Then we fell in love, Karga confirmed. Slowly, carefully, learning to trust each other and to see past the things we had been taught about each other's people. It was not easy and it was not simple, but it was real. And now we have this valley, this home, and both of you. We have everything we never knew we wanted. Will we always be safe here? Ash asked, his young face serious. Will the bad people leave us alone? I cannot promise you that, Zane said honestly. The world is still full of people who hate what they do not understand. But I can promise you that your mother and I will always protect you, and that we will always teach you to be strong and kind, no matter what challenges you face. And someday, Karga added, when you are grown, you will make your own choices about how to live and who to love. Maybe you will choose to stay here in this valley, or maybe you will go out into the world and find your own paths. But wherever you go, remember that you come from love, from two people who chose each other against all the rules and expectations of their societies. That is your inheritance, and it is more valuable than any amount of gold or land. The children nodded, not fully understanding yet, but absorbing the lesson nonetheless. They would grow up strong and confident, knowing they were wanted and loved, knowing they had a place in the world even if that place was small and remote. As the sun finally dipped below the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Zane reached over and took Karga's hand. She squeezed it gently, this human man who had given her everything, who had seen past her green skin and tusks to the person underneath, who had chosen to build a life with her when it would have been so much easier to turn her away. I love you, Zane said quietly, as he did every evening. I love you too, Karga replied, as she always did. For giving me a home when my own people left me, for choosing me when the world said you should not, for building this life with me. I love you for all of it. They sat together as the darkness deepened, their children leaning against them, warm and safe and together. It was not the life either of them had imagined when they were young. It was not the life their peoples would have chosen for them. But it was their life, built from courage and kindness and love, and it was more than enough. In the years that followed, their family continued to grow and thrive. Ember grew into a capable young woman who could hunt like her mother and build like her father. Ash became a thoughtful young man with a gift for working with animals and growing things. They both learned to navigate the complex world of being neither fully human nor fully orc, finding strength in their mixed heritage rather than shame. The small community of mixed families in the mountains grew slowly. More couples found their way to the remote valleys, seeking the freedom to love across the racial divides that dominated the rest of the world. Karga and Zane became elders of sorts, the couple who had been there longest, who had proved it could work. They offered advice to newcomers, helped build cabins, and created a network of support for those brave enough to choose love over prejudice. Henry's trading post became a gathering place for this scattered community, a place where they could meet and trade without judgment. Henry himself eventually retired and passed the post on to his daughter, who continued the tradition of treating all customers with equal respect regardless of their race or whom they chose to love. As Karga and Zane aged, their love never diminished. They still sat on their porch every evening, watching the sunset and reflecting on the life they had built. They still told their children and, eventually, their grandchildren the story of how an orc woman woke alone and walked to a farmer's door, and how that single act of desperate courage had changed both their lives forever. On their 20th anniversary of living in the valley, the community threw a celebration. Nearly 30 people gathered, humans and orcs and half-orcs, all people who had found refuge in these mountains and freedom to live as they chose. There was food and music and dancing, and as Karga and Zane stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by the family and friends they had found, they looked at each other with profound gratitude. "You ever regret it?" Karga asked him quietly as they took a moment alone together while others celebrated. "Giving up your farm, your old life, everything you knew?" "Never," Zane said without hesitation. "That farm was just land and buildings. All of this," he gestured at the gathering, at their grown children laughing with friends, at the mountains surrounding their valley. "This is life. Real life, full and complete. You gave me that, Karga. You gave me a reason to be brave, a reason to choose something better than loneliness and fear. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." "As would I," Karga said, leaning down to kiss him. "I woke alone that morning and thought my life was over, but it was really just beginning. Everything that matters, everything good in my life, came from the choice to walk to your farm and knock on your door, from your choice to open that door and see me as a person rather than an enemy. We chose each other," Zane said simply, "and we keep choosing each other every day. That is what love is, I think. Not just one grand gesture, but 1,000 small choices to keep building something together." They returned to the celebration, to their children and friends, to the community they had helped create. And as the sun set over the mountains one more time, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Karga felt a peace she had never thought possible. She had been abandoned by her birth tribe, but she had found something better. She had found a home, a family, and a love that transcended all the boundaries the world tried to put between them. The orc woman who had woken alone in an empty camp all those years ago was gone, transformed into someone stronger and happier. And the lonely farmer who had opened his door to an enemy had found redemption and joy. Together, they had built a life that mattered, a life that proved love could conquer hate, that courage could overcome fear, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single desperate choice and a willingness to see the humanity in another person's eyes. Years continued to pass, and eventually Karga and Zane became the elder couple of their mountain community, the ones who had started it all. They watched as their children fell in love and started families of their own, watched as more mixed couples found refuge in the mountains, watched as slowly, very slowly, attitudes in the wider world began to shift. The wars between humans and orcs did not end completely, but there were more ceasefires, more attempts at diplomacy, more people on both sides questioning whether the fighting had to continue. In their valley, Karga and Zane lived out their days in peace and contentment. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love never fading. Ember and Ash built homes near their parents, creating a small family compound in the valley. Grandchildren played in the stream where Ember and Ash had once played, and the cycle of life continued. On a quiet autumn evening when Karga was 52 and Zane was 60, they sat on their porch as they had thousands of times before. The valley was golden with autumn colors, and smoke rose from the chimneys of their children's homes. It was a peaceful scene, a testament to everything they had built. "We did good, did we not?" Karga said, her voice now roughened with age but still strong. "We did very good," Zane agreed, his hand finding hers as it always did. "Better than I ever imagined possible. I used to wonder what would have happened if I had made different choices that morning," Karga mused. "If I had tried to follow my tribe, or headed north to the war lands, or just given up and let the wilderness take me. So many paths I could have walked." "But you walked the one that led to me," Zane said, "and I will be forever grateful that you did." "As will I," Karga said, squeezing his hand gently. "Every day I am grateful. For you, for our children, for this valley, for this life. It was not what I expected, but it was what I needed." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors one more time. Their life together had not always been easy, but it had been real and meaningful and full of love. They had taken the broken pieces of their separate lives and forged them into something beautiful and whole. They had proved that love could exist between orc and human, that families could be built across racial divides, that courage and kindness were more powerful than fear and hatred. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, Zane pulled Karga close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They stayed that way for a long time, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a family and a legacy of love. The orc woman who had woken alone in the night and walked to a farmer's door had found everything she never knew she was looking for. And the farmer who had opened that door had discovered that sometimes the greatest courage is simply choosing to love without conditions or reservations. Their story became a legend in the mountains, told around fires and passed down through generations. It became a symbol of hope, proof that the old hatreds did not have to define the future, that individuals could choose differently and build something better. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth, that love, real love, could overcome any obstacle, bridge any divide, and create miracles out of the most desperate circumstances. Karga and Zane lived many more years together, growing old in their valley, surrounded by family and love. And when their time finally came, they passed peacefully, side by side as they had lived, leaving behind a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren continued to live in the valley, maintaining the home their ancestors had built, and keeping alive the story of how love had conquered hate, how courage had overcome fear, and how an abandoned orc woman and a lonely farmer had found each other and changed the world, one small choice at a time.